Clear prop.
Star 738, Yankee number 2, following twin traffic, 3 mile final, clear Pleasantville. 1 Charlie Bravo, exit in runway 25, going 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby. How are you?
I'm good. This week, we're taking on our listeners' questions. We've done a number of shows based on listeners asking us to talk about something. But this week is really a start of hopefully many episodes where you, the listener, get to ask us questions, and we're going to answer those questions for you. Maybe not in real time, but we're going to take a list of those questions and then try to fill in the answers over many weeks. And this is the first episode, so let's jump right in. All right, Wally, the question is, can you slip an airplane with flaps down? I think as I've said many times, I was probably a fairly apprehensive student pilot, a little afraid of the aircraft. Lack of knowledge created most of that for me. But occasionally, I could sense a sense of urgency from my instructor. We'd be a little high on final. He would say, let's slip it. I'm looking at a placard right in front of me that says, avoid slips with flaps.
Right.
And I'm thinking, this cowboy crazy son of a gun is going to hurt me, right?
Yeah.
It says avoid slips with flaps. What? Yeah. Can I slip with flaps? Is it safe to slip with flaps? What does all this mean?
Short answer is yes. Yes, you can. And the operative word on that placard is avoid. I think I've seen some that will say avoid prolonged slips with flaps extended. Well, what's the definition of prolonged? I don't know. I would say anything. I'm just thinking anything more than about 8 seconds. That's my definition. Your definition may be anything more than 2 seconds.
They're going to have to rewrite the Webster Dictionary.
Yeah, exactly. So, is there a problem with putting the flaps down and just slipping the airplane for minutes? Yeah, there could be an issue with some aerodynamics going on in the back of the airplane. But no, can we? And in fact, on a check ride, on a private check ride, that's one of the tasks that is required to be tested is forward slip to a landing. So yes, we can do it, and we will do it.
And so I think my chief described it, talked it through with me as I was working on some of my CFI training. It is possible to do it. It is safe to do it, but there is something you might sense in a Cessna. We're not flight engineers. We're not test pilots, but we have some experience. And so really what's happening per my chief instructor is with the flaps being down and being in a forward slip, the air is disrupted coming across those flaps and then hitting the elevator. So you might have some stability issues with the air that's going across the elevator.
Right.
And you wouldn't want that low to the ground, of course. So that's why probably most manufacturers are saying avoid slips with flaps down.
Yeah.
But you can do it. It's just not probably something you want to do for more than 8 seconds as well. I'm just kidding. More for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Keep the questions coming. We love your questions.
Another question we get is asking about efficiency of flight training. In other words, somebody wants to get their private pilot certificate, and someone wrote in and said, well, my cousin was a private pilot, and he said that I need to take care of getting the written done before I even start flight training. This is a controversial area.
And one that we agree on, but as you've said, we are no doubt the minority.
Yeah, I do believe we are in the minority. We are totally in sync, and this we just started talking about this one day. Bobby and I both believe that trying to do the written before you even start the flight training is probably not the way to go. I know for me personally, if I would have tried to do that, I probably would not have continued my career path to be a pilot, because I don't think I could have done it. I don't think I could have just read the book and read the theory and applied it to a knowledge test and been successful. I don't think I could have done that. What I needed is the practical application of it.
And even if you could memorize the answers, really, what are you gaining? I mean, I don't know too many people that are taking flight training or want to take flight training, ask some people what they should do, and are getting that answer that aren't wanting to be a professional pilot. I mean, it goes back to, like, really and truly, are you learning the material or are you memorizing the material? So assuming, and the advice I always give is, okay, you're going to meet Wally next Thursday for your check ride, and you're going to have to sit down and answer Wally's questions for an hour and a half to 2 hours. And you sit down with him. Do you want to talk to him about the questions you missed 6 months ago that you took a written exam on before you were even anywhere near taking your practical exam?
Right.
Or would you like to sit down in front of Wally and answer some questions about the questions you missed 10 days ago when you took your written exam, after you had been through all the practical training, really understood what winds and weather and airspace meant to you as you flew through all of those things, and could practically sit down in front of a computer screen and answer a weather theory question that you practically understood instead of the one you memorized.
Right.
It absolutely makes no sense. You will save no money. You will probably not get near as good of a grade. Wally and I, while we are the minorities, we are pretty confident we're right on when you should take your written exam.
Yeah, this might cause a little controversy. So if you're on the other side, feel free to write us, and we'll discuss it some more.
I would love to know the practical sense of why, for sure.
Yeah.
This is a good question, one that came to us, oddly enough, via a LinkedIn message. What phase of flight are you most concerned? And maybe concerned is not the right word from the question asker. Maybe when are you the most focused? Well, I'd like to sit here and say that we're both great pilots and we're on our A game throughout every phase of flight, and we never miss a single checklist item, and we're perfect. But that's probably not reality. So the simple answer is takeoff and landing, right? We all know that those are the most critical phases of flight, and I would say for the most part, most of us are on our A game, no question. But it's really, I'll share two for me, and Wally, I'd love your feedback. But as I became a multi-engine pilot and did all my training for twins, there's no question that I probably, whether it's right or wrong, I probably give a better takeoff briefing than ever in a light twin. I talk about what we're going to do on the go, while we're in the go, and before we take off, and as the gear come up. I mean, there's 4 phases of just the takeoff that I'm probably going to brief really, really well. And I am on my A game on those engine instruments and really paying close attention, because you don't want to get into a point where you're losing an engine on takeoff and not ready for it. While that's not common for most, I'll say probably the real one that I would answer for everybody is in the pattern on base and final turns. And probably when I'm not necessarily at the only operator of the control. So if I have a friend or someone that's learning how to fly and I'm flying with them, or maybe even it's a younger private pilot who has asked me to be a safety pilot with them as they do some work on their instrument stuff, then I am mostly concerned about going base and then final, because I had a great instructor who pounded into me, don't get slow and when you're low, and can I make the airport? So I'm constantly watching, are we overshooting? How fast are we going? Are we overshooting? How fast? Because I don't want them to pull up, base or final, when we're slow and stall that aircraft and hit the ground. What are your thoughts on when you might be most concerned or most focused in phases of flight?
Well, we're talking about kinder, gentler way of saying this. We're talking about not killing ourselves and what is going to kill us in an airplane. The bottom line is hitting the ground is what's going to kill us. So the closer we are to the ground, the more vulnerable we are. So just going back to takeoff and landing, I mean, that's when you're close to the ground. If I'm up at 9,000 feet and we lose an engine, let's just make the math real easy. And let's say the airplane's going to come down at 500 feet a minute. It's probably going to come down a little bit at a higher rate than that, but let's just use 500 to make the math easy. At 9,000 feet, I've got 18 minutes. I've got 18 minutes before I'm going to impact the ground. I've got options. I've got time to pull out checklists. I've got time to call ATC to let them know we have an issue and maybe we're going down. I also have options of my radius of where I can fly the airplane is greater. So I've just got more options. So certainly the lower you are to the ground, I could. That's why we have minimum altitudes to do maneuvers. I mean, we're not going to do stalls at 300 feet above the ground. We're going to go up to the appropriate safe altitude to give us a little cushion. If I stall the airplane at 9,000 feet, I got lots of time to recover. I can spin an airplane at 9,000 feet and don't have any issues whatsoever in being able to recover. Now, 500 feet, not so much.
Yeah, no question. All right, that's a great answer.
We get one question that I've gotten from multiple sources is, what is the number one problem area on the ground portion of a private pilot check ride? And this is easy to answer.
All of them?
Yeah. No, this has three answers to it. It's systems, and systems. And we've alluded to this before, but I think I do believe part of the problem, and this is just a victim of our society that we're in now. I mean, we all drive cars that are really good. The cars that are made today are really good, and they don't break down a lot. So, back when I was learning to fly, I had the hood of my car up a lot. I was changing spark plugs. I was changing the oil. I was adjusting carburetors. I was doing stuff to it. And so I was able to transfer over to the airplane. I mean, my car had a carburetor. The airplane had a carburetor. Well, most people who drive cars today don't drive a car with a carburetor. Their car is fuel injected, and so now they're getting into an airplane that's got a carburetor. So it's a system that they've maybe never even heard about. So it's not really their fault. It's we're a victim of our own success, if you will. So I think there's a lack of systems knowledge, and part of it just goes back to maybe not really reading the book,
right?
Because it's in the POHs on a pretty good systems description, and then we're not just talking about engine. We're talking about the environmental system, the heater, the vacuum system, how the instruments work, the gyroscopic instruments, the electrical system.
It's all there.
Yeah, it's all there. So, I would say systems, lack of systems knowledge.
And anything else that you would tell them that they need to do other than just read the POH to prepare?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of the airplane flying handbook, pilot's handbook of aeronautical knowledge. There's some great generic systems descriptions in those. But also, go to your flight school or your FBO, and when you see an airplane out with the cowling off, get out there and look around. And I would bet good money that if you asked the person working on the airplane to help explain some things to you, they would be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, they would point out the fuel pump and the magneto, and it would just make so much more real what you're reading in books that I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
All right, great answer. This is a question that I used to always ask flight instructors as I flew with them for the first time as a student or an instrument student or whatever phase of training I was in. And it was the first time I ever flew with an instructor, and we're heading out to the practice area or we're coming back from the practice area. I would say, when have you been most scared in an aircraft? Obviously with them, I'm asking with a student, and I've heard some pretty hairy stories. And I think everybody's got that moment that they were really, really, really scared. Mine, Wally, we've talked about it. It was my near miss, obviously, in episode 4. Go back and listen to that one. I probably should have died that day and got real lucky that I didn't. But that's not practical. Everybody's not going to have that experience. And for me, it was on my what was supposed to be my last long cross country solo. I was flying an aircraft at this flight school, and the chamois dampener, which is this little itty bitty piston looking hydraulic thing up on the front wheel that prevents it from having the wobbles, kind of keeps it aligned up. And that device must have broken or lost its fluid or something. On the go, I had the wobbles, much like you might have seen a motorcycle with the front wheel wobbling. And that wobble started turning me to the left, which is into a water runway at this airport. And I panicked. I can remember my heart racing. What if that would have happened at one of the other airports? My life flashed before my eyes as it related to that cross country. And I think my training kicked in. I just pulled the throttle, and I aborted the takeoff. And taxiing back was really no big deal without a lot of power. But I can remember going home and telling my wife, this was a big deal. She was panicked, but I thought each one of these little experiences is making me a better pilot. I'm learning so much by having this little incident or this little thing happen. But I can remember as a young, low-time pilot, that was one of those, I was really, really scared. How about you, Wally?
I would say the first time I found myself getting a little scared in the airplane, it was a solo cross country. I was a student pilot. This would have been probably about January of 1982, February timeframe of 1982. And I was flying from Monroe, Louisiana to Natchez, Mississippi. I believe it's 66 nautical miles. And the border between Louisiana and Mississippi is the Mississippi River. And I was in a Piper Tomahawk, and I distinctly remember this. It was a clear day. It was cold, and I was at 3,500 feet. And I remember beginning to cross the Mississippi River, and I promise that engine started running rough. I promise it did. And I don't know, there's got to be a camera on the bottom of that airplane that saw water down there, and it all of a sudden started running rough. I remember looking down at the Mississippi River, and for those of you who have not been over the Mississippi River, it's really wide. But I was at 3,500 feet. I could have easily made it to either side, but I remember looking down at the water and just noticing how fast it was flowing. And I remember thinking, it's got to be cold. And I promise you that engine started running rough. And I started going through my emergency landing procedures. And I got to the other side, and there's the Natchez Airport, and I went in and landed, and everything was just fine. But I go back to that a lot. I talk about flying a single-engine airplane at night. A very good friend of mine, Clay Dean, who is the airport manager up in Cleveland, Texas, where I keep my airplane, he jokes with me all the time. He says that airplane doesn't know when it's night. And I said, my airplane does, because that engine makes different noises at night. So anyway,
I think I hear the wind different going over the wings at night. I mean, something.
Yeah.
I'm on high alert for sure.
Yeah. But that was mine. Flying over the Mississippi River, and I still remember. I remember my heart rate going up.
If you have a scary moment in an aircraft that you want to share with us, shoot us an email, Bobby@behindtheprop.com, or both of us, Wally@behindtheprop.com. We would love to hear your story. Wally, we talk a lot about weight and balance, and I think often every example that I hear, for the most part, is weight related. We very rarely talk about balance.
Right. And
I guess in the real world, real mission flying that I do, balance becomes a problem. And I guess it's when you're doing other things, taking other passengers, taking other payload, that you may run into this. But because I don't ever remember it being a problem when I was a student pilot. But let's talk a little bit about what effect does moving the center of gravity have on the airplane's handling, and maybe more specifically moving it forward for these single engine aircraft that we fly most of the time. And I'll share, when we added a twin at this flight school, and the first thing my chief did was put 150 pounds in the nose storage area of that aircraft, I was shocked. Like, why would we want to put 150 pounds in there? And through education and reading and learning, that twin is so aft CG, the CG's more back, that you don't want that in a light twin when you're training, doing VMC demos and other things. You want that to be nose heavy. Well, right. The engine's not in the nose on a twin, so the weight in there helps with the training aspects of what you're trying to do and learn. But it's on the checklist. We check to see if that's there if we're taking the plane on a trip, etc. But let's talk a little bit about that. What are your thoughts as it relates to CG or the balance of an aircraft?
I think most people think that forward CG is good, aft CG is bad in general. I mean, we're talking about within the envelope. And the fact of the matter is there are advantages to an aft CG. You move the CG aft and the airplane is going to become less stable. It is still, as long as you're within the envelope, there are some advantages to that because you move the CG aft and you're going to get a higher true airspeed, and that's going to equate to better gas mileage, if you will. A young man several weeks ago, we were talking about this, and his comment was, "Well, I'm trying to build time, so a higher true airspeed. I don't really care about if it takes me longer to get there. That's fine because I'm putting time in my logbook and not miles." And he says, "And I'm renting the airplane from the flight school, and I'm paying an hourly rate, so I don't really care if I save fuel or not." And I said, okay, yeah, I understand that. I said, well, suppose we're getting to our destination, and for whatever reason we can't get into our destination, an unplanned event, the weather was supposed to be great, or let's say we get there, the weather is good, but there's a disabled airplane on the runway. Now we have to go to our alternate or an alternate. We're a VFR flight, so technically we didn't have an alternate, but we need to go somewhere else. Well, geez, if maybe we only burned 22 gallons on that flight rather than 28 gallons, wouldn't you like to have that extra 6 gallons in your back pocket? And his comment was, well, gee, I never really thought of it that way. So yeah, an aft CG, higher true airspeed, and you are going to get better gas mileage, if you will. Is the stability going to be compromised a little bit? Yes, but if you're within the limit, if you're within the envelope, you still should be within an acceptable range. I mean, every time we get in an airplane, we're taking a risk. If someone says, I want you to guarantee me that we will not have an airplane accident today, the only way you can guarantee that is to not get in an airplane.
Yeah. And so the envelope's key, and that should be something you should be able to calculate and know whether you are in or out of balance. I think we more often than not talk about that 50-pound piece of luggage we're bringing, but maybe where that's put, maybe play with where that's put in your calculations. See what would it take to get you out of the envelope, because in the real world, in real flying, you're going to have to make some decisions about CG, maybe to benefit you as it relates to fuel consumption or true airspeed, or just where do I put this bag so that I can take it with me. As always, thanks for listening. Please share with a friend. Please give us 5 stars wherever you listen to podcasts if we have earned it. And as always, stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.